In the last cut content, which got taken down, we covered episode 1 and 2, which had glossed over a lot of the details and mechanics related to how this world of legendary weapons functions. This time, as we go through episodes 3 to 5, a lot of the cut content is related to Naofumi's inner conflicts, as well as his developing relationship with Raphtalia. Of course, there's plenty more shields and backstory to go through as well. So let's see what exactly the light novel and manga skipped in today's episode of Shield Hero cut content. But first, this video is sponsored by Kurtzspell, a free-to-play 3D third-person anime-inspired action PvE and PvP battle arena game, brought to us by the same developers as Elsword. And when they reached out to me, unlike other sponsors, they didn't give me an outline of things to say. They just said play the game and then talk about the experience. So, okay. I hopped into the closed beta for a few hours and, well, I can confidently say that it's pretty damn fun. No, seriously. First off, I'm a huge fan of the graphics and the animation style. It's very fitting to the fantasy-themed elements of the world and pairs well with the combat style to make it visually appealing. It reminded me a lot of RWBY, which is why I tried to replicate Best Girl Piero with their current character customization system. I tried Raphtalia too, but no raccoon ears just didn't seem right. As for the gameplay itself, it's very smooth in the way that you can chain base attacks with your skills, dodges, or jumps to perform a variety of different combos. In both PvP and PvE, I found that you could be pretty versatile with your moves to really get the better of your opponent, especially in the online battles. So all in all, I see a lot of potential in Kurtzspell and highly recommend checking it out using the link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. Episode 3, Wave of Catastrophe, covering chapters 5 and 6 of the manga and 17 to 21 of the light novel. From where episode 2 ended to where episode 3 began, I'm sure you noticed that there seemed to be a time skip since, well, Raphtalia grew up a bit. In actuality though, it's really only been a week. You see, they skipped a lot of the grinding and just went straight to when Naofumi and Raphtalia are a bit higher levels. Specifically, in the anime, they're said to be 16 and 18 respectively, but in the novels, they're level 20 and 25. Regardless of their levels though, it's by this point that Naofumi has unlocked quite a few more shields. But before I get into those, it's probably best that you have a quick refresher on some of the shield's properties. Every shield has an equip bonus or shield ability, as well as the occasional equip effect. Equip bonuses and shield abilities are the bonus stats or skills that are gained when having a specific shield equipped. When mastered, these can turn into passive traits or abilities, and can be used without having the shield that powers it equipped. Then equip effects are shield-specific effects that will only ever appear when that specific shield is selected. Take the two-headed Black Dog shield for example. Its equip bonus or shield ability is known as Alert Shield, which sounds an alarm whenever a monster is within a 20-meter radius of his location. The shield-specific equip effect, on the other hand, is called Dog Bite. When Naofumi is attacked with this shield equipped, the two dog heads that appear on his shield will come to life and bite at whatever attacked him for 30 seconds. So in this case, the Alert Shield is something that can be used as a passive at any time. Well, after he masters that shield. But the dog bite effect can only ever be used when that shield is equipped. That makes sense? Good. So what other shields did they come across during their little power farming adventure? Well, we got the PQ shield, the wood shield, the butterfly shield, and the pipe shield, granting, in that order, simple weapon restoration skills, wood cutting skills, paralysis resistance, and the actual usable skill called Shield Prison. This one being a targetable active skill that can imprison a target for up to 15 seconds. It's while grinding these new shields and levels that he learns it's more useful to separate and absorb monsters as individual parts than it is to absorb them in random pieces and chunks. This way he can experiment with what can be used to obtain new shields, and from this method, he's able to unlock two shields from the porcupine-looking monster in the anime. The first is the Porcupine Shield, which has no info on what it does, and the second is the Animal Needle Shield, this one granting an equip bonus of increased attack, alongside an equip effect called the Small Needle Shield. Now, that may not seem like a very significant shield, but that marginal increase in his attack ability essentially doubles his current attack power. It's certainly nothing spectacular, but it's still progress towards becoming an independent fighter. Not only that, but it also opened up a whole shield tree line with various attack skills, which is actually very significant for Naofumi. All that's left now for him to do in order to gain more power is just find the items and materials related to those shields, then absorb them. Eventually, after unlocking enough of those shields, he could potentially gain enough attack-oriented abilities and attack bonuses to start fending for himself. Now we can go to when they're visiting the shop owner. Of course, you now know that Naofumi getting confused over the shop owner's comments on Raphtalia being older is due to the fact that he's been seeing her as this same kid the entire time. I'll explain that a bit more once we get to the next episode. But right now, while they're discussing what armor to buy, the shop owner actually offers him a similar chainmail to the one that he bought before getting betrayed. This got under his skin a little bit, cause not only did it remind him of what happened, but he also didn't want to re-buy something that he already paid for. Even seeing Raphtalia get complimented by the shop owner and act all happy reminded him of mine. And it's these little things that constantly made him upset and angry. Anything that reminded him of her or the events surrounding her immediately ruined his mood. The shop owner takes note, so he offers some other armor, a heavier iron one, but this one didn't have a property known as Air Wake. Air Wake being a trait that's imbued during the production of the armor, and it allows the armor to absorb the wearer's magic power, resulting in a lighter feel to it. This meant that any armor without Air Wake was pretty much a no-go for Naofumi. Eventually, they reached the conclusion of doing a custom armor, so long as the materials were provided for. In this case, he settled on a barbarian armor, made from Piku feathers, porcupine and Usapil skins, and then some raw copper and iron, costing approximately 130 silvers. Before they leave, the shop owner says he'll give them a discount on any upgrades in the future. This was because after doing business with him multiple times, his impression on Naofumi had changed for the better. Naofumi didn't actually seem like that bad of a guy, and when Naofumi heard this, it really meant a lot to him. In the manga, he even changed his sulky face to one of genuine gratitude and thanked the shop owner. At this point, it's fairly clear that the perception people have on him is very mentally taxing, especially when a majority of that perception is painted as negative and majorly false. So for him to hear from someone else that he's not that bad of a guy is certainly a small ray of hope over his current state of despair. Anyway, they then go visit the Dragon Hourglass to find out how much time they have before the next wave. That's when everyone else shows up. 4 heroes, 12 adventurers, and then Raphtalia, all in this single room. After first hearing Motoyasu's voice, he wanted to kill him, right then and there. But he couldn't. Not yet anyway. He bit his tongue and was about to leave. But as we saw, the other heroes walked in and Motoyasu starts flirting with Raphtalia. While watching, Naofumi thought that was it, and Raphtalia would just want to leave him right then and there. The way that the manga portrays this is a bit more detailed. Naofumi storms out of the church and leaves town absolutely furious. As they're in an open field, he takes his anger out on a balloon as he thinks to himself that if Raphtalia wasn't a slave, she definitely would have already left him for Motoyasu, constantly comparing her to mine in the sense that she'd just betray him if she had the choice and wouldn't believe the truth even if he told her. Of course, this wasn't the case, but it's yet another example showcasing Naofumi's internal state of mind. Let's now go to when it's the day of the wave. The little emotional speech that Raphtalia gives has a little more substance in the light novel. She goes a bit more into her past as a slave, talking about her previous owners who would buy her then return her a few days later. You see, she was first bought by a rich family and meant to be a servant to their household. They taught her basic things regarding the job, but during the nights, she would cause too much commotion screaming from her nightmares, so she just ended up being returned. The second one was more or less the same. Bought to do a certain job, but the screaming in the night resulted in her return yet again. It's her third owner and all the rest after that were just the worst. They would buy her for a short period of time just to torture her, then send her back. And it was these repeated instances of torture that brought about her cough and overall deteriorating health. Of course, hearing this didn't change the fact that Naofumi didn't really care. He still only replied okay to her words, more concerned about the threat of the incoming wave and the possibility that he could die. Which brings us now to the start of the wave. They get teleported and start facing against enemies known as interdimensional zombies. Naofumi has his light metal shield equipped, instead of the normal small shield that we see in the anime, because at that time, that shield had the highest defense stats. At some point he tries to attack with his animal needle shield, but every time he would land a strike, an audible clang noise would be heard, meaning that the attack does pretty much 0 damage. The rest of the episode, which is spent finishing up the wave and whatnot, is pretty much the same. So now we can proceed to episode 4, A Lullaby at Dawn, this time covering chapters 7 to 8 of the manga and 21 to 23 of the light novel. The episode starts in the castle, where they're having this grand banquet to celebrate their victory over the second wave. Of course, Naofumi was only there to receive the cash prize reward and eat some free food. And although being surrounded by all these pretty women, they all just reminded him of mine. So given his mental state, he found each and every one of them repulsive. Then when Motoyasu comes to challenge him to a duel, he actually shouts the fact that Raphtalia is a slave, as if he was trying to turn the whole room against him immediately. Naofumi's just there thinking to himself how this weirdo must be one of those guys who takes games way too seriously, especially considering that he would rather fight the Chimera boss over saving the defenseless villagers. Raphtalia knows this challenge is unfair, and offers to fight in Naofumi's place, but ends up getting gagged and taken away. At this point, Naofumi is absolutely livid, and there's a great shot in the manga that showcases this frustration. Motoyasu sees this menacing face of rage and was much more taken aback by it than he was in the anime. Now, as we get into the duel, Motoyasu opens with the Chaos Spear skill. It's not a type of attack that he can use multiple times in a row. After using it once, he has to wait for a certain amount of time before using it again. Basically, it's a cast cooldown. That being the case, Naofumi takes the opportunity to try and charge and tackle Motoyasu. He knocks him to the floor and tries to punch him, but it's to no luck because all you can hear from each punch are the clank sounds that indicate no damage being taken. Meaning, if Naofumi was to win this fight, he'd have to get creative with skills of his own, or just use the well-hidden balloons underneath his cape. Of course, mine uses the ability called Wing Blow to interrupt the fight. It's a type of wind magic that throws air at a target and hits like a fist. Then the rest of the duel plays out in a similar manner. But it's after the duel that Naofumi comes to this realization about mine. Not just the fact that she was the king's daughter, or merely in it to gain favor with Motoyasu, but how the whole plan was a setup to become this historical legend. You see, legends are born through evil. The more evil you were, the better you'd be remembered as time goes on. And it was mine's plan to be remembered as one of the heroes that defeated the evil fallen shield hero and saved a little girl from slavery. As Naofumi comes to this conclusion, he becomes overcome with hatred. And it's this hatred for everything around him that unlocks the Shield's Curse series. More specifically, it's the negative emotions that are experienced through a traumatic event that are absorbed by the Shield and turned into this Curse series. As for what it does, well, you'll find out soon enough. It's during this that mine, aka Malty, forever becomes known as bitch to Naofumi. I'm serious, that's actually how he refers to her for the rest of the novel. Anyway, Raphtalia goes to comfort Naofumi, but it's only after he feels her warmth and her kindness that he truly sees Raphtalia for the first time. You see, this entire time he was so caught up in his anger and hatred, his very need for revenge, that he stopped paying attention to everything around him. He numbed his senses to the rest of the world, which is why he couldn't taste anything or see Raphtalia grow. In a sense, he was literally blinded by anger. It's only after Naofumi receives this heartfelt message from Raphtalia that he gains a bit of his sanity back and becomes a bit more mentally stable. And that pretty much wraps up episode 4. But before we can go on to the next, there was one scene skipped from both the manga and the light novel that I've seen quite a few people complain about. And it was this. Now just hold your assumptions for 1 second. It was just a polite gesture. While they were eating sandwiches at the top of the castle, Naofumi thanks Raphtalia for believing in him and staying by his side, and he does so with a kiss. It was just a small wholesome thing, but if it was in the anime, it probably would have been enough to set the sails of most ships. Alright, episode 5, Philo, covering chapters 8 to 10 of the manga and volume 2, chapters 1 to 6 of the light novel, which is quite a hefty amount in comparison to how many chapters are normally adapted per episode. So we start off in the castle, where each of the heroes are given their prize money. Of course, Naofumi wasn't going to get anything until Ren and Itsuki spoke out against his mistreatment. This spurred an even more concerning moment for the king, because Ren had mentioned something that implied that if he didn't give Naofumi his cut, then perhaps the investigation into his crimes should be reopened to evaluation. Of course, this is something that the king wouldn't want, and it was for this reason that the king yielded and gave Naofumi his share of the cash. As they leave the castle, we know that Raphtalia offers to get the slave crest reapplied to her body, wanting it as a symbol of proof of their faith in each other. Knowing that this was the reason, it spurred emotions deep within Naofumi that he could really only describe as love. Though not quite the type of love that you're thinking. It wasn't a romantic one, but more of a parental love. It's like how in Overlord, where Ainz treats the Floor Guardians of Nazarick as his children. Similar to that, Naofumi sees Raphtalia as his own child and wants to protect her, which is kinda weird considering he sends her straight to the front lines of every battle, but okay. In a conversation he has with the slave trader, he even refers to her as his daughter. It was also during this same conversation that Naofumi learns more stuff about the kingdom, like how it's not a monolithic entity, and if many people were unhappy with a certain decision from the throne, riots would definitely take place. The slave trader even goes as far as to mention that the king isn't the most powerful person in the kingdom, as if to hint towards other people that pull the strings from the shadows. It's here in the slave trader's shop that Naofumi also unlocks the slave user shields that we saw in the anime. Slave User Shield 1 gave the bonus effect of slave maturation adjustments, and Slave User Shield 2 allows for slave status adjustments. Maturation basically means that you control how your slave grows, and the status adjustments refers to your slave's conditioning. So essentially, this type of shield gave a bit of control over your slave's growth and conditioning. The shields itself weren't anything powerful, but those effects were definitely something worth tinkering with. He then uses a bit of Raphtalia's blood in combination with the ink that unlocked the first two shields to unlock the third level of the Slave User Shield, this allowing for a higher level of slave maturation adjustment. Now, before they leave the slave owner's shop, Naofumi spots the gacha eggs, and there were several reasons that he used to justify this rash purchase. He was already thinking of buying another slave, but he didn't want to miss the chance of getting a creature from the egg worth more than the slave. He was also not very fond of having to purchase a whole set of new equipment for a second slave, whereas with the monster, it could fight without any equipment whatsoever. Though a much more subtle reason more tailored to Naofumi's personal tastes was his love for pets and the online games that he played. So all of those reasons combined was enough to make him gamble some money on a potential good investment. It's after this that they go visit the apothecary and the witch. The witch identifies Naofumi's affinity for support and recovery magic, whereas with Raphtalia, she was noted to be more suited for light and dark magic. The reason being that, as a raccoon-type demi-human, she has the ability to control phantoms, both ones with shadow-like or refractive properties. They then go and adventure around Loot Village, doing various things, collecting resources, unlocking shields, leveling up, and while doing so, he found that he could use his built-in UI to check the time till the next wave. Turns out that each don't spawn after a fixed period of time. The time interval between them differs, and this next wave was a lengthy 45 days away. But yeah, Naofumi was unlocking more shields, and he did so not only through random resources scattered throughout the village, but by also taking parts from the defeated monster corpses that were scattered across the battlefield. At the end of the day, he unlocked the Mortar Shield, the Beaker Shield, and the Druggist Mortar Shield from various compounding tools. Then he got the interdimensional Locust, Bee, and Zombie Shield. The Locust granted a defense buff, the Bee Shield an agility one, and the Zombie Shield gave rot resistance to items in his inventory. From the Bee corpses, he was also able to unlock the Bee Needle Shield, which was one of those shields that boosted his attacks ever so slightly, and it had the equip effect of providing him with a bee poison that caused paralysis. These were all fine shields, but it was the corpse of the Wave Boss, a Chimera, that unlocked some really interesting shields. From this single monster, he got the Chimera Meat, Bone, Leather, and Viper Shield. The Meat Shield improves the quality of his cooking. The Bone Shield grants medium shadow resistance, most likely referring to shadow magic. The Leather Shield grants a major defense buff of +10, and the Viper Shield was something a bit more complex than the other three. Not only did it increase his compounding skills and give him resistance to poison, but it also came with a skill called Chained Shield that could only be used after becoming a higher level. Naofumi believes that once the next wave is over, he'll be able to bring out this shield's true potential. It also had the equip effect known as Snake Fang, which, considering that it comes from the viper head tail of the Chimera, it's an ability that likely has poison attributes. As you can tell, the post-wave battlefield is pretty much a goldmine for unlocking new shields and gathering useful resources. And if the wave spawns different types of enemies every time, then yeah, that's just a whole bunch of new shields for Naofumi to unlock. So this brings us halfway through the episode, and the next half covers Philo's story, which is 4 light novel chapters compressed into 10 minutes, so I think here's a pretty good place to stop. I'll be back again in a couple of weeks to post the next video, so long as this one doesn't get taken down, like my first one, which is something I'm currently trying to resolve. Now, before I go, thanks again to Kurtzspell for sponsoring this video. It really was pretty fun testing it out, and you can use the link in the description to sign up and join in for the next open and closed betas. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!